of the respondents, so over half the survey, was from an international audience. And the other thing we tried to contextualize what was the turnover of these kinds of companies. So 26% of them had a turnover over 5 million US dollars. And you know, so there was an element of quite an SME population, but there was also the larger middle-sized organizations part of that survey. As you can see, you know, it's quite an extensive sample, but it was very much about trying to find out of you know, the collective mix of practitioners and size of companies. So what was the core question? So we're trying to build a digital roadmap. So the questions are, you know, well, which technologies are actually changing the organization's network, the supply chain network? And we wanted to see if that landscape had changed. I will use the phrase blockchain because sometimes people see this as could be potential hype. But, you know, if you've got a digital ledger, you're into cryptocurrencies and so forth, you know, it might be very specific to the kind of businesses that you are. But we also want to look at the areas that will make you remain more competitive. If an organization is making a major step change into the digital landscape, you know, are these resources in-house? Are we having to get consultants in? Or are we having to retrain our employees and practitioners to this new way of thinking? So a practitioner that might have 28 years experience working in the supply chain to become more digitalized on the systems and tools and technologies that are available could be quite a challenge. And the final thing we're looking at is really how quickly do we need to onboard these specific technologies. So the areas of interest, most organizations in supply chain do have information technology. They might have an enterprise resource planning system or a management information system to try and pull a lot of the business functions together. So from sales to marketing to production to procurement to supply chain design, logistics and transportation. And it was interesting who was benefiting from what. A lot of the information from the study was drawing more onto the platform itself. Have we got the data? Is the data accessible to everybody? How is that data being manipulated? Are certain departments exploiting more of the data from the customer interface? Or is it very much on the end user perspective of saying, well, actually the goods are complete, it's ready for distribution, and the client wants to see where the products are going within its distribution network. So there was a number of areas of leverage, but there was no real standout one apart from getting the information technology right in the first place. Go back a slide. Yeah. So the foundations, most of our respondents had the vision of cloud computing and big data. Cloud is really valuable in terms of if you're trying to pull your network of information together. However, within this particular slide, it was asking the questions, are the respondents considering the first step, the cloud computing scenario? And if so, when they were thinking of doing it. So most of them were actually had heard of cloud, had started maneuvering their existing systems from either exchange servers or data servers into moving into a cloud so it can fit better within the network. But then the next phase of when you start collecting all this data is what about the analytics to say, well, what is the data telling us? And there's loads of professions out there that have got lots of analytical tools, but is it helping them in their decision-making process going further forward? So that was the foundation. The challenge is, you know, and what we were picking up from the survey result is people are building this platform. The big data analytics might feed into the machine learning. The machine learning feeds from data from your smart sensors and your IoT domain. But when you've got the machine learning and you've got the rules and you've got the smart thinking of assessing the decision-making process, you may be then incorporating aspects of AI. Now, the funny thing is with AI is currently available in most systems we already operate. There's AI in the Microsoft Office suite, for example. But there are individuals that will actually looking at more in a transactional process and maybe looking at how rules-based systems or machine learning or AI can help them in that blockchain scenario. So a lot of it is almost the onboarding of the technology, of almost a place for everything, but everything in the right place. And what these organizations are doing is getting the fundamentals of the cloud, analyzing the data to almost say, is this data clean? Is it accurate? Is it predictable? If it's predictable, they will build in the machine learning kind of capabilities. So you can see the kind of, we're very much, in my personal view, is that we're on a testing time of trying these things out. And it might be on the standard product ranges we offer, or the standard services we offer. But the more bespoke and high levels of customization is becoming more of a particular challenge. So in terms of building this 5-year road plan, this digital roadmap itself, and we've seen it in the press, and we've seen it in a number of white papers and publication outlets, that autonomous vehicles, especially in the supply chain network, is becoming quite interesting. And it might be, everybody might be having their test bed of drones, robots, and so forth. Okay, sorry. But it's also having this test bed of augmented reality, virtual reality, of testing the marketplace. And this marketplace might be just servicing our customers and our consumers. So we are almost using the sales arm of our organizations to promote the new technologies that we are considering or starting to make those initial steps in our research and development. So here's the question I've got for you. Is the 5-year plan now under review? Now, because of COVID and COVID's actions and how we've had to pivot in response to COVID, does the 5-year plan actually exist now? Does the 5-year plan, has it been shortened? Because we've probably read that we were going to do this in 5 years, but we've had to do it in 6 months because of the issues of COVID. So one of the things we wanted to ask you as our audience, our first poll, is, has COVID, refocused your technology? Is that okay? Now, do I hand that over to yourself, Mike, to facilitate that? Or? So the question we wanted to ask you in a poll is, has COVID changed your focus of technology? Because as I go through this information, this was a pre-COVID scenario. So if you focused on one particular aspect of, if it was cloud computing, or if you're now thinking of moving into drones.
Yep, so the poll should now be up here. So
wonderful, thank you, Mike. Yep. So it's really getting a consensus to say, have you had to pivot a lot quickly? And that 5-year plan is maybe reduced to saying, well, this is what we're going to have to do in the next 18 months in response to a global pandemic. So that's the first poll we wanted to ask you. Okay, and we know that things have changed. Okay, go back a bit. Sorry. And like Industry 4 is a network. And that network is offered lots of information. That information that could be formalized data. That data drives your information, and that information may be very much. Sorry about technology. Okay, and that information itself might be feeding your enterprise resource planning, and it might feed into your 3D printing of a prototype or a development. But it might be giving you data on your certain consumer behavior. Or if you've got, you're analysing your products out in the field and you're doing preventative maintenance programs. This network is complex, and you might be dealing with legacy data. You might have to clean that data, and it has to be compatible across all your systems. So if you've got a robot cell, do all the robots talk to each other? Do they learn from their mistakes and feed into that more localized network? To say, if you do the product again, there are lessons learned. Technology is expensive, and one of the challenges because of COVID is, where do we invest? Is it the last mile logistics is now the biggest challenge? Is it the element, so we like with the pharmaceutical supply chains and the distribution of PPE, that we might think, well, how are we getting to the end user? How often, for example, have we forgotten the face mask and we're about to go on public transport? So we had a project with a vending machine company that actually uses machine learning to tell us how much PPE equipment is being consumed within these vending machines that sit on platforms or in highly density kind of regions within our cities. The network is complex, and the goal is one of saving time, cost, manpower, reduction in errors, but we also need to create those efficiencies. And as I said, the eye is on the prize. So whatever you do as an organization, it has to be tailored to fit the model that you're looking for. And it's back to the very first slide of where you're in this pick and mix scenario within the Industry 4 suite to say, well, which tools and techniques do we need to invest first? What is the onboarding and how we go further forward? So go back a slide. So out of the 16 tools, and I'll let you scan through those, everything that was written in blue is very much has not changed. So the demand on cloud has continued from the beginning of this study, but also for future thinking. Everything that I highlighted in red, so if you look at blockchain and procurement and contracts and warehousing, this is what people are looking at from the as-is model. This is what we're doing today. So robots for manufacturing and production, collaborative robots to end consumer cobots. So, to have a website instead of having a person manning the phones for your Q&A questions, they use a chat box or a cobot to help deliver the communication to our customers' perspective, because customers want answers now. They're not prepared to wait as much as what they may have used to. So one of the things we wanted to do then, well, if this is the as-is model, what's the future looking? And the future is looking in a number of perspectives. If you look at the top right with VR and AR, it's very much, traditionally it was about the end user experience, the onboarding of the client or the customer. But as we've gone on and we talk about the 2-year or 5-year plan, we're using these technologies more in warehousing, in our inventory management. And the funny scenario was that I looked on LinkedIn today, and there was a guy with his tablet or his phone taking a picture of stock control, and there was an AR machine, there was a VR kind of capability, an AR capability, and it automatically did the stock check of what was on the pallet or what was in stock. So we are using technology to help in real-time data to be more accurate, such as on order picking. The thing at the bottom, we're driving the smart sensors, the IoT. We are moving not from just the quality control, because that's what the sensors used to do on the lines or on the packaging, but it might be looking more at the transportation logistics. Where is the vehicle within the network? Has it arrived at its distribution center? When is it going to be unloaded? And so we're using more of the technology, not just for quality, but for greater visibility. So the things that I've highlighted are the kind of themes. So IoT is the big player in today's world, of where we're looking at, from forecasting and demand planning of how we're using the smart sensors to give us this real-time data to feed into our facilities. And whether it's having smarter robots moving from manufacturing production to warehouse and inventory management, like order picking and so forth, and having autonomous vehicles within that picking scenario. But it might be moving into that warehouse inventory management. So there are things that are changing, and there are themes that are becoming more popular. So the second question I've got within our poll,
sorry, it's Mike. I'm trying to manage the poll for you.
Okay, don't worry, sorry.
So do you want to see the results of the last poll? I guess that'd be quite interesting.
Yes, that'd be great, thank you.
Just pop those up, so everyone should be able to. That should come up now. Yep, here we go. So we can see that the vast majority of people actually see that there is a change in focus. So just, I think, just interesting to share that back to the audience and also to yourself as well, Ian.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. Thank you.
And for the next poll, then, let me just pop that one back up. Right. Okay. Something gone wrong here. I apologise. Second question seems to have disappeared. So I launched that poll now, so that should come up on everyone's screen, and they should be able to answer that now. So give people a few seconds, and then we'll put those results up as well.
Okay, so whilst that's calculating up, I can move on. So we know COVID has changed our business models to some extent, or even to a greater extent. But it'd be nice to see what the poll actually indicates for us. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So the game changers. As I said before, the main element of the Industry 4 that drives the change is almost the customer's demands. Us as customers, oops, let me just get the slide back again. Okay. As the customer changes its demand, there is a focus of where we are dealing with almost the external interface into our organisation. But as a result of that, it puts far more pressure on our operational capabilities, because we want to remain competitive. We want to be agile and nimble in terms of the responsiveness to our particular customer base and client base. Within all those domains of those 16 kind of disciplines of Industry 4. But what we wanted to do is help us in our decision making. So one of the things we're looking at is these Industry 4 is looking at trying to help us in this complex decision making, whether it's forecasting, whether it's looking at internal resources, actually getting transparency from our people management in our systems, our rules that we adopt. But as a knockoff, we have emotional intelligence. How easy was it for the onboarding somebody's work practices to start using technology to inform our decision making? And whether we've got to then make it, well, actually, it's made me smarter because I have more data at my fingertips. I've got more predictive analytics helping my decision-making process. How well is it feeding our network? And it might be, key parts. And like I said, the responders, they're looking at negotiation, is helping judgment on decision-making. And it might be help us in our creative, our marketing drive of selling some of the products and services that we offer. So I wanted to add that because that was when the computer says no, well, what do we need to do to understand why the computer is saying no? So where is the investment? So if you're focused very much on the data analytics, and an organization might have employed a data scientist, whether there was a contract or there's somebody dedicated in building the data infrastructure, but also collecting the data, interpreting the data, disseminating that data to those key individuals. But the big data has been used in the contract management. So blockchain, for example, might be to manage contracts, to make us smarter in our T's and C's, our terms and conditions. But it might be to do with our transportation logistics network. So the themes that were coming out of the 445 respondents were filtering into these 4 core themes. For the blockchain, contract management, robotics, purely on the manufacturing, the assembly and material handling and product development. But from the IoT, the smart sensors, the data is almost looking at transparency of data from remote locations or within our physical distribution centers and so forth. So there were a couple of these are where people are investing based on the number of respondents. Okay. So one of the conclusions are, in a number of cases, while certain technologies were expected to impact particular organizations and sector, investment predictions for those technologies are surprisingly low by comparison, and that is probably down to that 5-year scenario. If people are doing that strategic plan of 5 years, there is time to consider or reconsider their options. But because of COVID, we might have had to accelerate that decision-making process. And our preparatory measures might be actually looking at, we've got to go for more of the digital disruptions, such as, the virtual factory, the flexible working conditions, better work-life balance scenarios for our network that are involved in this particular supply chain or distribution network. Those observations have practical implications to both our supply chain managers, so it might help us inform the decision making, not just purchasing the capital equipment, but it might be, have we got the right people to give us this service offering? So do we need a data analyst that can do the analytics or create the machine learning for the rules-based system that we want for that particular core product, which gives us the greatest return on investment? So organisations are horizon scanning, looking at the productivity levels of where the technology can help them in their efficiencies, but also the investment of internal upskilling of the training courses in the suite of offerings of Industry 4. But if we can't do it, one of the final things I wanted to show you, because I am an academic, of people can reach out to universities and the kind of research that we do to almost help the chess pieces in the game of this Industry 4 to help us in that forward planning or horizon scanning to say, well, this is our business. We do a variety of products. We distribute it across our whole value stream. What is the onboarding process of which pieces should be put in the right order to make this the greatest return on our investment? Okay, and that kind of concludes the presentation. As I said, I've been doing this for about a couple of years now, or it's longer than that. With working with Snips, it's been about for 10 years. So I've been a member across the network, but the Industry 4 thing has been going on for about 4 years. So happy to take any questions, and I hope you enjoyed the journey from the survey's findings.